Welcome.
Welcome,
Welcome
spooky
back.
amigos.
Spooky
Girls
friends.
gone spooky. Episode
Episode?
31.
Yeah,
Gang,
wow.
gang. Wowza.
Wow. I can't believe
So if
how long we've been doing this. Feels
I
like it's
know,
brand new.
amazing. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know. I'm still like so excited to record
Yeah,
every time.
same.
I'm like, yay.
I
Um,
know.
I was gonna say, so if 13 is unlucky, does that make 31 lucky?
Probably. It's
I
in
asked for a
verse.
13, but they threw a 31.
Yep. So this
Gonna
is
kick his
lucky.
lily ass. Oh yeah. Offspring.
Uh-huh.
It's lit. Okay, guys, we've got a scary ass episode for y'all. We may be like tagging in like popcorn style a little bit because we're both covering the same topic, and we try to keep it fresh. Shit, that's fresh.
Yes.
We try to keep it nice and fresh for you guys and for us also, so we don't know exactly what each other is gonna talk about.
Yeah.
But with that, take it away, Amy.
Mix it up.
Mixing it up.
Okay. Well, I guess, yeah, first, I do think I want to share something really
Ooh,
quickly
yes.
on the more serious side. And my intention with sharing this is not to be like, ooh, check out how spooky this is, because that's not it at all. But
It's actually
I think,
quite sweet if you
yeah,
think about it. Like, it's more sweet than it is eerie.
yeah, exactly. And I think of it as kind of a reminder, or maybe I'm just asserting my opinion, that as humans, we are all tapped into something that connects us. And I think in our conscious minds, we aren't, we're not aware of it in our conscious minds very often. And I don't know if we can like work toward it being that way, but our energies and our intuitions sometimes just know things. And I think it's up to us to pay attention to those things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, my story that I want to share is that one of my boyfriend and my old friends passed away over the weekend. And his death was really sudden and unexpected. And it's really tragic for everyone he's leaving behind. And my boyfriend and I were not close with him anymore. And they did live together. And even at that time, you know, those friends where you're like in the same group, but you're kind of just existing around each other.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily seek each other out. But we had some really nice times together. Like, I was reminiscing about him, and there were some nice things. But the strange part of it is, since we had grown distant, he came up in conversation completely out of the blue on Saturday. And I was reminiscing about this really nice thing that we shared at one point. And then the next day we found out that he had died the night before. So he had come up, and I was thinking of him on the day of his death. And
so wild.
that's, yeah, just
after
totally,
probably not having thought of or talked about him for months.
Years even.
Years.
Because
wow.
I think
I guess that was a long time ago now that I met him and you guys were friends still.
Yeah. Yep. The last time I saw him was probably 3 years ago. And yeah, I will say he never really came up very much because we had grown apart. But yeah, that day it was really, I was thinking about him in a very nice way. So it's just so, I don't know, it's interesting. We are all tapped in somehow.
Definitely.
So pay attention to things that come to your mind seemingly out of nowhere, because sometimes it could be something.
Yeah,
we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. And yeah, we'll just take a moment to think about him and honor his memory.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, let's talk about something scary. Mhm.
Spooky. We lured you guys in with the sweet story and
Yeah,
the seriousness, and now we've got you.
yes, you're
You're
hooked.
you're you're hooked. Your guards are down because
Yep.
you think this is serious, but it's
Hmm.
actually deadly.
Oh, God.
You know?
Here we go. Okay, so yeah, we're talking about black eyed children. And we talked about them a little bit last week, so here we are as promised. But
Let's go.
um, black eyed children, I saw them described as creatures. Sorry, my table is shaking.
Oh.
Um, creatures. Did you see anything else like how they were described?
Um yeah, yeah, paranormal creatures, I guess.
Okay,
Um yeah, continue,
because
continue.
they're not just children, but they
No, they're not
resemble
kids at
children.
all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they resemble them, and they're usually between the ages of 6 and 16. And their defining feature is, of course, that their eyes are completely black or void of any color.
Casual.
And they're usually seen hitchhiking, begging, or approaching people, even at their homes, asking for something. Which being approached at your house is like, that crosses the line.
Yeah,
You know,
no.
that's too
No.
much. Yeah. So
Mm-mm.
some people who believe in the existence of black eyed children think that they might be aliens. Others
Mm.
think that they could be children of the devil himself. And I saw a couple people say vampires? Question mark.
Oh.
So
I
I
feel like
don't
we've
know.
debunked that already,
Yeah.
but I don't know. What do I know?
Yeah, who knows? But okay, the origin of black eyed children, the stories I saw vary a little bit.
Hmm.
So, for example, last week in our episode about Cannock Chase in the UK, I mentioned Lee Brickley, who was inspired to write that book. I think it was like UFOs
Right.
and the Pigman or something.
Yeah. The
Um,
pig man.
yeah, so he was inspired to write that book because his aunt had an encounter with a black eyed child, which I
Hmm.
also told that story in last week's episode if you want to hear it. But
Hmm.
her encounter took place in the 80s, the 1980s. And again, specific to the Cannock Chase area, some say that the black eyed kids appeared there after 3 child murders took place in
Oh,
the
that's right.
1960s.
Hmm.
But the origin story I saw the most said that the first sighting took place in Abilene, Texas in 1996.
Oh,
So
yeah.
those timelines vary a lot. Um,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I think since I saw the Abilene, Texas one in the 90s the most, I think we should just start there.
Yeah,
But
that seems like a good place to start.
perfect. So, this incident in Texas was reported by Brian Bethel, and he shared his story about an encounter with 2 black eyed children. And a few sources that I found said that he shared his story in posts, quote unquote,
Hmm.
which makes it sound like it was posted online. But
Right.
um, I don't know. I did look up because the history of computers is unknown to me, but
Yeah.
blogs did exist in
Oh, okay.
1996. So maybe it was a personal blog, but I don't know
Yeah.
how exactly it was shared.
Huh. Or I wonder if
But
even like you'd consider calling like writing into a newspaper or something, like a
a
post. I don't
post,
know.
yeah. I mean, I
I
was
don't know.
wondering if you saw anything else
I
because,
didn't.
uh,
No.
okay,
Oh.
because that then led me just to remember our episode on Slender Man and like
Oh.
Momo and all those things.
He was a
because
journalist.
yeah.
Sorry, it just
So
dawned on me. So he probably wrote it like in the paper. I think he
okay.
like reported it like in a story.
Okay. Yeah. I think the
I think.
term post, I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of it's kind of an odd choice, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Maybe they were just modernizing it, but
Mm-hmm.
if it was online, it's like the same thing as Slender Man, right? That
Yeah,
who's to
very
say
similar.
we couldn't
Yeah,
speak these things into existence
right. But then
if
all the
it.
conflicting timelines, I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think they've been around, but
yeah, I think so too.
who knows? So, okay, now here's Brian's story. So, Brian had pulled into a shopping center parking lot with a movie theater and also the office of an internet service provider called Camelot Communications. And Brian had pulled into the parking lot and he was using the light from the movie theater marquee to write a check to drop off at Camelot to pay his internet bill. And as he was looking down, filling in the check, he heard a knock on the driver's side window of his car. Yeah, I know. Looking up, he saw two kids. One was younger, maybe 9, and one was older, maybe 13. So Brian cracked the window. Thankfully, he just cracked it. He did not open it all the way
Yeah,
to see,
holy.
yeah, to see what they wanted. And the older kid asked him if he'd be willing to give them a ride home so that he could get money in order to go back to the movie theater to see Mortal Kombat. And Brian immediately felt what he described as soul-racking fear at their presence. So, without replying to them and feeling so uneasy, Brian broke eye contact with them. And they continued to coax him, saying, "Hey, it won't take long. We're just kids," etc., etc. But his fear continued to mount. And when he looked back at them to tell them, "I can't help you," that's when he noticed that their eyes were completely black. And the kids were persistent, and Brian continued to come up with excuses as to why he wouldn't be able to give them a ride, which led the older child to get frustrated. And he said, "We can't come in unless you invite us." So that was the final straw for him. He got out of there, and he he maintains that this is true. So he's
I mean,
even,
I
I
see the
think,
vampire theory with that
yeah,
message.
because they have to be invited. But yeah, I think the last article I saw was in 2018. It was an interview with him, and he's still saying that his story is true. So yeah, that's
Lord.
spooky as hell. But that is maybe where it started. And then now there are many, many more. So
So many.
I have just a couple that came, well, via Thought Catalog via Reddit. So somebody um, collected all of these. And these are both long, so I'm going to try to just like summarize the first parts and then read the rest. So this one is from Sarah Beth 11. And this took place on Halloween. Typical.
Classy. Typical.
She said there had been trick-or-treaters coming through most of the night, but by 9:30, her husband decided he wanted to go to bed. So it was just her and their dog, Chloe, who is an American bulldog, but she's very docile, she says. And so let's see, they were watching some ghost shows, so she was a little bit on edge. And of course, that's when she hears knocking at the front door. And her first thought was, okay, more trick or treaters, but our porch light is off now, so why are they here? And also, why knock? Because they have a doorbell.
Yeah.
And she said that their doorbell is glow in the dark, or it's lit up in the night. So why are they knocking? And she also said that their front door has a big glass
Mm-hmm.
window in it.
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, they can see in. And it's like, ugh, why have a front door with a glass
I know. You gotta
window?
frost
That's
frost
so
the glass at
creepy.
least.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I don't love that.
they could see in, and she could see that their silhouettes were of children. So once she saw that they were children,
Allegedly.
she, yeah, she
Allegedly
was like,
children.
oh, okay, just kids. Now she felt
Mm-hmm.
relief and like, okay, I can open the door. But
Ooh.
when she opened it, they did not say trick or treat or really anything at all, other than to say there was a girl and a boy. She was about 11 and he was about 8. And the girl said, "Ma'am, can we please come inside and use your phone to call our mom?" As she spoke, something in the pit of my stomach was telling me something was wrong. What kid, even at that age, doesn't have a cell phone of their own these days? I can't remember the last time I had anybody ask me to use my phone. She said, "Don't you have a phone of your own you can call your mom on?" And this was when things got really weird. Both kids turned to look at one another like they were going to say something to one another, but neither spoke. They turned back to me, and the girl said, "Ma'am, my cell phone battery doesn't have any charge left in it. Can we please come
Ew.
inside and call our mother?"
Also, who has a
And
landline?
yeah, I know. That's so true. So thankfully, this woman is like having horrible fear. Her gut is telling her, do not let these kids in. So she asks for the mom's phone number to call for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly this girl is like, "My little brother has to use your bathroom. Can we please come inside while you call our mom?" So she's just getting really persistent. And eventually she says, "Please, ma'am, we are scared and alone out here. We have to come inside." So
Oh God.
they're like getting angry. And thankfully, again, this woman is like, "No, I'm not letting you in here." And that's when she finally looks at them again. Their eyes are completely black. So
No.
it's like when they get angry, that's when their
Mm-hmm.
eyes turn. So it's like they're working on you before
Oh.
you can tell that
Oh.
something's wrong.
Or
Other
they
than
just
that,
kind of distract you with other things. You're not
yeah,
really looking them in the eye. Like if they're
yeah,
looking away, kind of, or looking
mm-hmm,
down and being shy, and then they
yeah,
look up and you're like, oh, fuck.
right, yeah. So creepy.
So
Um,
creepy.
Thankfully, they go away because she's like, "No, this something's wrong." After she sees their eyes, she closes the door. And the funny part is that Chloe, that bulldog, she
Oh, yeah.
is like cowering under the bed in one of
Oh,
the guest room. They couldn't find her for like 20 minutes, she said. So she was sensing
oh,
something. She
totally.
knew it
Gotta
was
listen to the
wrong.
dogs. Gotta
Yeah,
listen to the dogs.
they know. They for sure know before we
They
do.
know. Hundo P.
Yeah. Okay, then I chose this one just because it was also on Halloween, even though these occur all the time, not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
just on Halloween. But this is from Halloween Warning, is their username.
Mm.
So again,
They
I'm
just go
gonna,
around posting the same
yeah,
story
on
everywhere.
every
Halloween
site.
morning. Also, this
Yep.
is episode 31.
Oh,
And
yeah,
Halloween is October
October
31.
31. It's meant
So
to
it
be.
vibes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a vibe.
It's a vibe. The energies
It's a
match.
vibe. Jeez.
Okay, so Halloween warning. I will summarize because this is also long. But basically, this storyteller has a neighbor who's single man, but he's a family man because his brother and sister in law and their kids are always coming over, and he loves Halloween. So
Mm.
he always decks out the house for Halloween, loves it, loves kids, loves it. And so
He loves it.
he really stressed that in here.
Okay, loves it. I
Because
honestly I can relate. I can relate. People are like, where are
Yep.
your Christmas decorations? I'm like, what
No,
Christmas decorations? It's all
it's
Halloween.
still Halloween.
It's still Halloween.
Yep. But I think he probably stressed that because the story, this man, the neighbor, had not put up any of his Halloween decorations.
Mm,
So that's when this
the
guy, the
Scrooge.
storyteller, knew it was something was up.
Okay.
So he went over and asked him, like, why haven't you put anything up yet? And he says that he's going to keep his house dark this year and just put the candy out on the porch. And he asked if he was going out of town, but he said no. Something happened last year that really scared him.
Hmm.
And so he says, hang on, there's so much text here. Okay, one, he had a few kids come to his porch. One was probably around 13 to 14, and the other around 16 to 17. They weren't dressed up, but he remembers the older one was wearing a flannel checkered shirt. He was immediately overcome with uneasiness, like opening the door was a huge mistake. They just stared at him and he noticed they had really big irises and dilated pupils, so big he couldn't even see the whites of their eyes. He was frozen there holding the candy bowl like he couldn't slam the door in their face as much as he wanted to. So he nervously tried to smile at them, hoping they would break character and ask for candy or something. The younger one said they had gotten lost and needed to come in and use his phone. That was when he closed the door more than halfway on them and said, "No, sorry." And the older one said something like, "Can't we just wait in your house until our parents come get us?" But by then he was convinced that his life was in danger and these kids needed to leave. So he said, "No, sorry, good night," as he inched the door closed and locked it.
Hmm.
And he was so scared at that point that they were going to try to break in through one of his windows, but he looked through the peephole and they had turned to leave. He watched TV at low volume so he could hear any sounds at all and stayed up till 6 a.m. because he was too scared to go to bed. So, poor guy, he
I
got
hate
Halloween
that.
ruined for me or for him.
Yeah.
And then
God.
I guess this writer came along this story about black eyed kids online. So he told his neighbor, sent it to him, and an hour later the neighbor came over and was like, "I had no idea about that legend or
Yeah.
about black eyed kids." And he was like, "That is absolutely what I saw." So
Oh. All
yeah,
these are giving me chills.
I know, same. Yeah,
Creepy.
they're even though they're all very similar stories, I feel like
Yeah, they
they're
totally
just
are.
scary every time. It
But it's
doesn't.
also because they're similar that's creepy. Because it's like not all of these people like the neighbor. Like he's like I had never heard of anything like this before. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Which makes it even scarier because then it's like confirmed by a bunch of different people who are like blind to what's actually going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, no likey.
I know. Oof,
No
spooky. All right,
likey.
your turn.
My turn. Okay, so I have a few more stories. I had very similar background to yours. The only thing I think I would add is just that they're like after the Abilene. So yeah, so it's funny that like the Abilene one, it kept coming up for me too. I found a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
different articles about it. But I think the reason for that, because like there's a lot of tabloid coverage of them
Mm-hmm.
dating back to the 80s, which I thought was really
Hmm.
odd. But then, yeah, others say that it's this like Texas reporter. After the Texas, excuse me, after the Texas one was I guess like made public, there was another person in Portland who had a very similar but supposedly unrelated
Hmm.
encounter that he like posted about, or some guy posted about. Um, Bethel then went on to tell his story in 2012 on a reality TV called Monsters and Mysteries in America, which I thought was so
Uh-huh.
funny. And then he wrote a follow up article for the Abilene Reporter News describing the experience again. And like you said, like still saying, like, I stand by my story. It's
Yeah.
legit what happened. And then in 2012, there was a horror film that started production called Black Eyed Kids. A bunch of other like references, but it's not just in the US either. Like there
Yeah.
was a lot of coverage in particularly British tabloids, and I think
Hmm.
like not like, you know, real newspapers or any like really legit publications. I think because people just nobody believes them.
Yeah.
So um obviously there's the like question of, you know, is it actually that there's a rise in sightings, or is it that
Hmm.
people are making it up because they heard about it? Or what always comes to mind for me is like the world is getting more and more connected. So as we get more connected, we're just exposed to more volume of experiences people very far away from us are
Yes.
having.
Yeah.
So
True.
very interesting.
Hmm.
So a couple stories. So I'm going to start with a couple short ones. I have a couple long ones. And then I have one like really interesting one that kind of takes us into like the realm of a whole other kind of creature, but there's like a big
Ooh,
question mark around it. So
okay.
I'll do that one last because I think it's just kind of like fun.
Hmm.
Um, so this is from Reddit from Mammoth Peak 1212. So this is a quick one. So this happened several years ago. I was still trying to get used to the new route I was taking to get home from work. Everything about the day was off, like very off. I felt like I was being watched, not by my bullies, of course, but by something different. When I'd had enough of the feeling, I looked and saw this kid just standing across the road from me. I could tell he had fully black eyes, and so I was staring at him, trying to make sure I was seeing what I was seeing and thinking maybe my brain is playing tricks on me. But when the kid walked over to me, I did the only thing I knew to do, which was run. All I was thinking about was getting home and forgetting that that ever happened. So like as he's walking towards him, he's
Yeah.
like, "Confirmation, your eyes are fully black. I'm out of here."
Uh-huh. Oh God.
So I take it he was also young at the time because it
Hmm.
sounded like he was going home from work, but he was probably still like a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Good
so that
first
one's
job.
creepy. This one
Lee.
is interesting because it's the user's name is Forged Tita, and it's he or she says this happened when they were 4 or 5 years old. So they were very little, and this is like the
Yeah.
youngest account that I'd found.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I think kind of makes it seem like it's possible it was a dream or just like a false
Yeah.
memory, but still interesting just because of the detail that's in here. Like if this were a dream, like this is a
Yeah.
detailed ass dream.
A vivid dream.
So, yeah. So once when I was 4 or 5, I was on a swing at a park in a big city, and I saw another child with pale white skin, black eyes, in dress clothes on the swing beside me. I looked at him and asked him where his mom was, and he told me he didn't know, and I felt this huge sense of sadness and dread sweep over me. I went to tell my mom, who was about 20 or 30 feet away, about the little boy, and when I turned around, he was gone. My mom thought I was making the whole thing up, and we left a little while later. And now, 17 years later, and I still don't know what he was or what he
Mhm.
wants or how he exists, but I know that it happened. My best friend and mentor tells me they are demons that feed off the sadness of children, but this doesn't really make sense to me because fear would be easier and higher yielding. I love how logical they are about it.
Yeah, trying to
Um,
explain.
yeah, but I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. I was like, oh, that's a kind of a different twist on, because like you were saying, a lot of the stories are really similar.
Yeah, that is a
So
twist.
this one's a little bit longer. This one is from Trippy Hippie Kid, which love that username.
Uh-huh.
So this happened, they said that this happened many years ago, and they had never heard of this phenomenon
Prior.
before, or
Hmm.
that there was like a whole Reddit, like subreddit dedicated to stories about
Hmm.
them. So the poster says, I've been raised in Florida my whole life from Orlando to Miami. And this incident took place in Orlando, in a neighborhood I have lived in since I was a child. Nothing like this had ever happened before in that area paranormally. But there was a lot of crime in the area. I'm starting college now, and this happened when I was in about 8th grade, summer going into 9th grade. I was at my old friend's house who lived in the same neighborhood, and it was a very sunny day. So we hung out for a bit, and I started making my way back in the very early afternoon, probably around 2 p.m. It's not even a 5-minute walk I'm not even 5 minutes into my walk when a small boy approaches me. He's wearing jeans and a green polo shirt that had a symbol on the corner, like a polo shirt would. So I thought he was from an organization. He handed me a card, but when I looked at him, it was black eyes. They were all black, completely black, and I was so taken aback. I took like 2 steps back immediately. And mind you, there was no one around whatsoever. But as soon as I got startled and realized that I saw these black eyes, I noticed an elderly woman show up on the opposite side of the street staring at me.
Oh,
They were
God.
both staring. They were both wearing the same shirt and had those pure black eyes. So there was no one around. He sees the boy. The boy looks him in the eyes. As he's like, hands him a card. He looks up, looks him in the eyes, jumps back, looks around quickly and sees, oh, wait, there's another one across the street.
God.
And not a kid, but an old lady. Which is the thought of an old lady just suddenly being like faster and stronger than she should be really is just one of my like least favorite things. That they when they put that shit in horror movies, a black-eyed granny, a BEG, I don't know. Holy. So let's see, where did I leave off? So I noticed her staring at me. This kid is still trying to hand me the card, but he hasn't said anything yet. And so I don't know why, but I took it. And then my mom, out of nowhere, like a millisecond after I grabbed the card, comes speeding down the street because she knew I was at my friend's house. And she tells me to get in. And I do, obviously, because I'm scared. And she asks me if I'm okay once I'm in the car. She told me she had an extreme sense of doom come over her out of nowhere at home. She said she dropped everything and got in the car and sped to where I was. And then in parentheses, they say, my mother is spiritually gifted and she has been since she was a child. She's always had paranormal things happen. And I suspect they say low-key psychic, which I love. Just like low-key psychic.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. So she's definitely she's tapped into something. So she took them back home. I told her what happened and she said, burn the card away from the house. Or she said, we have to burn it. So she burned it and that was really it. But it was just such an insane situation. And I'm so lucky to have my mom and to have her be who she is. Cause who knows what would have happened. Wow. So, and then they say in parentheses, which I find very interesting, keep in mind that Florida is a hotspot for human trafficking, but that doesn't explain the pure black eyes they had and the woman appearing almost like out of thin air and the feeling my mom had that I was in danger suddenly and she had to get me. So and then they're like, I don't know if human traffickers can now teleport and have pure black eyes, but
God,
so
hopefully not.
Big yikes. But that was interesting because I was like, I hadn't even thought about that like, like human traffickers. Well, if you don't know this, then PSA, human traffickers use kids and usually women, like other women, to lure women into places where they can then be, sedated in some way to be taken. So they would make sense, but then a kid and then what's the granny gonna drag you off? Like, that seems kind of unlikely.
Yeah.
So anyway, very creepy.
Yeah. Wait, did they look at the card? What was on the card?
They didn't say.
Okay.
They didn't say.
Ooh.
I don't know if it was just like an opportunity to like engage with
just an excuse.
Yeah, probably. But they burned it and they didn't say what it was.
Yikes.
So this one is acid spitting emu. These Reddit names are the best. So this is a story about like from their uncles. This is not their personal story. So my uncle, an OTR owner and operator for about 30 plus years. I don't know what an OTR is. It's like a railroad?
Let me just look it up real quick.
Okay. OTR owner and operator for 30 plus years, told us, which includes their cousins and the OP, a story in the mid 80s. So this predates Abilene,
Oh.
about a run. Actually, sorry, no. He told them about it in the 80s. It happened in the 70s. So this way predates
Oh.
Abilene by like
Yeah.
2 decades. So he was driving from Nashville to Chicago, and then Chicago to San Francisco, and then back to Nashville. So big, long story. According to his story, he was driving through the desert. I can't remember if he said it was in Arizona or Nevada, but you know, they say, but I digress.
Either way.
Which reminds me of Jeff. Jeff used to say that all the time, but I digress. It was about 10 p.m. and he had been driving for 14 or 15 hours at that point. He said that, and this is his words exactly, there hadn't been shit for 100 miles but sand, cactuses, and snakes. I love it. Me too. Really painting the landscape here. His eyelids were starting to grow heavy, so he pulled over on the side of the road, headed back to his sleeper, and passed out, which obviously is very common if you're trucking cross country.
Yeah.
At around 2 a.m, he was awakened to the sound of tapping right outside of his cab. Yeah. Thinking it might have been Highway Patrol or DOT, Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He hopped into his passenger seat to grab his logbook before going to see who was knocking. As he grabbed his logbook, he heard the tapping again coming from the lower glass of his driver door, followed by a child's voice saying, "Hey, mister, we're thirsty and tired. Can we come inside?"
No. No, you can't.
Actively, immediately no. Like, immediately no. Straight to jail. He was suddenly struck with this feeling of absolute dread. He said it was so strong that he didn't even want to look to see who was speaking. Something you have to understand about my uncle, and the entire time I'd known him to that point, I had never seen him scared of anything. And then they say in all caps, anything. I'd seen him charge headfirst towards a guy that had drawn a gun on him. I'd seen him literally attack an alligator that had gotten too close to my cousin when we all went on vacation to Florida one year. Okay, so this man is a baller and also a psycho.
Yeah.
And I like him.
Little of each.
Yeah, a little bit. Nothing scared this man. However, even years after this incident, as he was telling us the story, we could see the fear in his eyes. So this man was like very, very freaked out by this situation. Yeah. He said that they had tapped on the glass again and asked once more to be let inside. Against his better judgment, he looked over at the glass and then just froze. He said they looked like any normal kids, maybe a little pale, but their eyes. If you haven't guessed by now, their eyes were solid black. He described them as seeming to have eyes, but also not have eyes, and yet felt like they were staring right through him through the glass. He immediately yelled out, again, his words, "Hell nah, I ain't letting you little fuckers in here."
That is the only appropriate way to respond.
That's literally the only way to respond. "Hell nah, I ain't letting you little fuckers in here." That reminds me of my grandpa. R.I.P. He said that they stared at him almost angrily for a few seconds and then just disappeared. Not like they turned away or walked off or stepped down from the bottom step, but just poof, we're gone.
Yeah. We're out of here. Oh, God.
Yeah. He sat in his passenger seat for a few seconds trying to figure out what the hell had just happened when suddenly they started pounding on his passenger door right next to him and yelling, "Let us in now!"
Oh,
he said they didn't sound like kids anymore. And with zero hesitation, he jumped from the passenger seat into the driver's seat, threw the rig in gear, and peeled out from there as fast as he could switch gears. He said he didn't slow down till he hit California and took an entirely different highway back to Tennessee.
I would do the
same.
Them
coming back for more is so messed up.
Crosses the line.
He did say he saw them again later on that morning, though. He said he'd been trucking down the highway for another couple of hours when in his lights, he saw those same 2 kids on the side of the road, just standing there staring at his truck.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Whoa.
They continued to stare at him the entire time as he passed them, but were gone when he looked for them in the side mirrors. He told us he found another gear in his truck that he didn't even know he had then. LOL. Yeah. So this is they go on to say, just like a quick little epilogue, I guess. This is almost the exact story he told us that day and many times after, translated from his usual dialect of redneck into proper English for your reading pleasure by yours truly. Could it have been a nightmare? Not likely, since he was obviously awake when he was driving into California that morning. Could it have been a story he made up just to scare us kids? Maybe, but he wasn't really the scary story type, as well as that he told us all the same story well into our adult years. Could it have been the hallucinations of an overworked, sleep-deprived mind? Possibly, but he'd worked these hours and had even driven this same route for many years before and after. Also, the whole black-eyed children phenomenon hadn't even been popularized in the mainstream yet. It wouldn't be for a couple decades to come. I'll let you make up your own mind on his story. I'd be interested what your take is on it.
I believe him.
That one freaked me out. Like, freaked me out.
Yeah, that's the first one that I've heard where they came back again.
Yeah.
Like in the ones
after
I
disappearing,
read,
like the like poof disappear and then pounding.
Yeah.
I hate how they get angry. That really freaks me out.
Yes.
Like,
That's...
no. You little
no.
demon.
Yeah. Total demon. But
total demon energy.
Yeah. I feel like it's better for them to approach you in a car than at your house.
Yeah.
So you can
Except
just
they can't come in anywhere, I don't think, if you don't invite them in.
Yeah, but I feel like with a car, you can like just get out of wherever you are.
Yeah. Hell no, I'm like, you little fuckers in. Oh, I
if they
love
came
that
to my
response.
house, I would like never go outside again because are they just
that's
hanging
so
out
true.
around there? I don't know. Spooky.
Waiting for you. For you. Yeah. They've got BDE, big demon energy.
That's for sure.
That is for sure. Okay, so this last one is the one that's like maybe fringing into another zone, and I'm so sorry, but I know I'm gonna mispronounce this word. So it's Calupiluit, I think. So it's something. It's not like a skinwalker per se, but it's a creature that comes from indigenous lore, I believe. So I'll just read the story because it comes from this specific religion, but it's also a culture called Yupik, Yupik. Which have you heard of that before? I hadn't heard of it before.
Probably in school, but
yeah,
there's so much from school I wish I remembered and I don't.
it's well, they talk a tiny bit about it, not very much, but so this user, lame deer alone, or Lamadeer alone.
I prefer that
one. I'm an idiot. Anyway, okay, so they say, I've said before that I once saw what I have come to believe was a calupiliot. Okay, that's how we're gonna say it.
We'll stick with that.
If that's wrong.
Yeah.
Should also be said that while I've gone out of my way to learn what I can about the Yupik religion and culture, I didn't really consider myself spiritual for the most part, and this is in some part because of the tradition of deaf individuals being treated as alignalgi, which is a kind of de facto shaman. Anyway, so it can be, one of the things they said is like older, what is this? Oh, I like put something weird in my notes. So there was a little, like, basically like growing up, they were exposed to this culture, it sounds like. So older folks who you don't know, like being like too close or too familiar, families asking you to hang up charms after someone there dies. The only thing, like all these like rituals, like they just like weren't into the rituals.
Yeah.
So The only thing I was ever comfortable doing was a little ritual I like to call a spirit send off. Think of it as a small funeral for an animal you kill, thanking it for its life and wishing it a safe trip to its afterlife, which is also a good place to start. I hunt a lot. Yupik trap, fish, and hunt quite a bit. Caribou, marmots, seals, walrus, fish, and waterfowl. We never hunt lynx, ravens, or otters. It's downright dangerous to do in some parts of Canada/Alaska because the local populations don't take well to it. When I was pretty small, we had a man from the lower 48, love that, the lower 48 come up and start trapping otters right outside of our settlement. He was told not to, and he just told us it was legal, which he was correct, it was. But he was found floating in the bay with a shotgun wound in the back a few days later.
Whoa.
Yeah. So this was I think this person lives in Alaska. So obviously Alaska is next to Canada, but this person is based in Alaska. So onto the story. So that's just some context. So they are a part of the Yupik religion and culture, although this person like knows a lot about it. They're like not super into it. Most of the time when I go hunting, I take a sled and my rifle, an old Lee Enfield built in 1915 no scope for you hunters out there. My coat and furs, a pair of binoculars, and a few other items. I tie my sled up and leave the dogs and then walk to try to get close enough for a shot on a caribou, which is normally 500 to 600 meters. This is pretty long range with a scope, but against an animal that size, without a scope, but against an animal that size, I can manage without it. I had walked a good, just a quick little flex.
Yeah.
I had walked a good distance when suddenly I started to feel pretty uneasy. I'm normally very vigilant while I'm out. Not being able to hear means you need to pay attention for bears and other potentially aggressive predators. After a bit, I noticed something, a tan spot out in the distance. I used my binoculars to try and see it, but it moved behind a hill. So I moved again. I got more uneasy and started to feel a bit odd, like I was maybe just like a little drunk or even dizzy. I kept going like this, walking a bit and looking and not seeing anything, and walking and looking and still not seeing anything. After what had been much longer than I had initially thought, I finally kind of saw what it was. It was another person a good distance off, and it's odd to see another person out here. So normally you want to communicate with them to make sure everything is all right. Now that the figure was in sight, it looked like another girl. So I assume the poster is also female.
Yeah.
Longish black hair, also coats and furs that were lighter in color than mine. I leveled my binoculars to look at the person who had their back turned to me as they got up to the top of this small hill, and then they turned to look at me. And the realest thing is not that the person seemed, and I think by real they mean like most like intense or striking thing, is not that the person seemed to have black eyes and look pale or cold. That is definitely noteworthy, but it's that I felt like I was looking at a reflection of myself with these features.
Oh God.
Yeah. I'm not saying this person looked a little bit like me. I'm saying at that distance, if it was not for the eyes and complexion, I don't think my mother would have known it was not me.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. I was maybe 16 at the time, and people have had discussions about whether or not black-eyed kids can look like people you know. So I'm asking a similar question. Can black-eyed kids look like you? So Calopiloet, for the record, are supposed to be able to look like anyone they want. So when I saw this person, quote unquote person, I was understandably affected, but not necessarily afraid or panicked. I was immediately aware, however, like someone who just realized they wandered into a minefield. I was on a hill with a slope in front of me and a shallow valley between us, much further away from my dogs or sled than I thought I was, and I was not super familiar with the area. This exact situation is how many people die in part of the state. Shallow valleys like that often hide rivers that are maybe 2 to 4 feet deep and frozen over with snow on top. But the seasons you hunt in, the ice is never thick enough to stand on. So if you try to cross them, you fall in and usually die from hypothermia in about an hour. The figure just turned and walked down the hill. I did the same, turned around and walked back to my sled. It was a lot later than I had thought, so I ended up using my tent, and me and the dog slept in there for the night. I can't remember how I slept. I don't think I had trouble sleeping or dreamed poorly. I don't think or didn't think at the time that whoever this was trying to kill me or trick me. I think I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I didn't tell anyone because there was no point. Either they wouldn't believe me or they'd simply think she's Oleg Nalgi. Of course she would see something like that. So the poster is clearly deaf.
Yeah.
And I wasn't in the mood. I've always been very comfortable in the wilderness, not because I don't worry about it. I've always taken a very, if the wild wants me, there's nothing I can do about it stance. And I still kind of feel that way. But now I am really thinking about this question of the black-eyed kids in Kalupilluit and their physical form. We have stories of Kalupilluit replacing people for whatever reason. They're not inherently malicious figures in our beliefs, more like figures that you can't quite understand. So trying to understand their motives is like trying to understand what the moon is thinking. But the whole connection with black-eyed kids is making my mind race, and I really want to know if anyone else has had a similar situation. So I thought that was really interesting because I had never heard of, honestly, this culture or religion, Yupik, at all. And then I kind of went down a hole because there are a bunch of stories, like not really similar to this, but a lot of people think that maybe black-eyed kids just are Kalupilluit, but that kind of doesn't make sense with that, like the dread feeling, because that seems to be, I don't know.
Right.
Seems to be kind of central.
Yeah.
There were like details of that one that I forgot. Like I read it twice today and I was like, oh wait, right. She's deaf. Which hence the initial note where she's like, I don't love how I'm like supposedly a shaman just because I can't hear.
Okay. Interesting.
But
yeah. Wow. That
scary.
Yeah. I don't want to ever encounter something that looks like me, but a creepier version.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even though it was a harmless encounter.
Yeah, the trucker one scared the crap out of me, so I didn't want to end on that one since it is evening here when we're recording. I was like, I don't really want to be scared all night.
Oh, yeah. Gotta block that out now.
Block that out. So that's Black-Eyed Kids for y'all, you little spooky hoes. Hope you enjoyed. Hang on to that BDE, guys, that big demon energy. I feel like we all could use a little bit of that right now.
Just a touch, just the good part.
Just a smidge, just a little smidgen. Well, thank you so much for listening. Stay spooky. Follow us on social at Girls Gone Spooky. If you have any Black-Eyed Kid stories, please send them. And if I'm mispronouncing any of these words, please feel free to correct me. You guys can also DM us or message us wherever, Facebook, Insta. If you're like, I don't use email. Looking at you, Gen Z. You've got options. So, and I'm not saying that in a condescending way. Legitimately looking at you guys. All right, y'all. Stay spooky.
Stay spooky. Bye.
Bye.